The American Revolution is often presented as a heroic struggle between freedom-loving colonists and an oppressive British monarchy. But this simplified version hides a far more complex and layered reality. While slogans like "No taxation without representation" and dramatic events such as the Boston Tea Party dominate textbooks, they represent only the surface of a deeper story. Beneath these famous moments lay years of economic tension, social inequality, political manipulation, and conflicting interests among the colonists themselves. Not all Americans wanted independence, and many benefited from British rule. Wealthy merchants, landowners, and political elites often shaped revolutionary rhetoric to protect their own economic power, while ordinary farmers, laborers, women, enslaved Africans, and Native Americans experienced the revolution very differently. The hidden story of the American Revolution reveals that it was not a single, united uprising for liberty, but a complicated struggle driven by class divisions, global politics, and competing visions of freedom. Understanding these hidden dimensions allows us to see the revolution not just as a fight against Britain, but as a turning point filled with contradictions and unresolved promises. One of the least discussed aspects of the American Revolution is the role of economic self-interest among colonial elites. Many of the loudest voices for independence were wealthy merchants, lawyers, and plantation owners who resented British regulations that limited their profits. Laws such as the Navigation Acts restricted colonial trade, forcing merchants to trade primarily with Britain and pay customs duties. While these laws were designed to strengthen the British Empire, they angered colonial businessmen who wanted unrestricted access to global markets. Additionally, British efforts to enforce tax collection after the costly French and Indian War threatened colonial wealth. Smuggling had long been common, and stricter enforcement endangered illegal profits. Revolutionary leaders framed these economic grievances as moral arguments about liberty and tyranny, but behind the scenes, financial motives played a major role. Even after independence, many of these elites remained in power, suggesting that the revolution was as much about shifting authority from London to local ruling classes as it was about expanding freedom for all. This hidden economic motivation challenges the idea that the revolution was purely an idealistic struggle for universal rights. Another hidden truth of the American Revolution is that colonial society was deeply divided. Historians estimate that up to one-third of the population remained loyal to Britain, known as Loyalists or Tories. These included government officials, merchants dependent on British trade, recent immigrants, and many ordinary people who feared instability and violence. For them, British rule represented order and protection rather than oppression. Civil conflict erupted within the colonies, with neighbors turning against each other, property being confiscated, and loyalists facing harassment, imprisonment, or exile. At the same time, many colonists were indifferent or simply focused on surviving daily hardships. The revolution was not universally popular, and support often fluctuated depending on military success and local conditions. This internal conflict reveals that the revolution was as much a civil war as it was a war of independence. The idea of a united colonial population rising together is largely a myth created after the fact to promote national unity and patriotism. The hidden story of the American Revolution becomes even clearer when examining the experiences of groups often excluded from traditional narratives. Enslaved Africans faced a cruel paradox. Colonists demanded freedom from Britain while continuing to deny freedom to millions of enslaved people. Some enslaved individuals sought liberty by joining the British, who promised freedom in exchange for military service. Thousands escaped plantations and fought for the crown, believing British victory offered a better chance at emancipation. Women, too, played vital, but often overlooked roles as organizers, spies, nurses, and economic supporters of the war effort. Despite their contributions, women gained little political power after independence. Native Americans suffered perhaps the greatest losses, as many tribes allied with Britain to resist colonial expansion. After the war, victorious Americans continued to seize native lands, pushing tribes westward. These forgotten voices exposed the revolution's limitations and hypocrisy, revealing that its promise of liberty applied selectively rather than universally.